So today we're going to be talking about the poem Song by George Szirtes, which is really a poem about not giving up and showing resilience and being able to make change. And although the setting could be anywhere, the dedication at the start of the poem is an allusion to a South African politician, so it may well be connected to apartheid. This political system heavily favoured white South Africans and punished everyone else through economic and social restrictions. And we're going to go through that in a bit more detail. But first of all, let's have a listen to the poem and see what you think. Song for Helen Suzman. Nothing happens until something does. Everything remains just as it was. And all you hear is the distant buzz of nothing happening until something does. A lot of small hands in a monstrous hall can make the air vibrate and even shake the wall. A voice can break a plate or glass, and one pale feather tip the balance on a sinking ship. It's the very same tune that has been sung time and again by those whose heavy fate has hung on the weight that they oppose, the weight by which are crushed the broken voices of the hushed. But give certain people a place to stand, a lever, a fulcrum, a weight. However small the hand, the object, however great, it is possible to prove that even earth may be made to move. Nothing happens until something does, and hands, however small, fill the air so the buzz of the broken fills the hall, as levers and fulcrums shift, and the heart, like a weight, begins to lift. Nothing happens until something does. Everything remains just as it was, and all you can hear is the distant buzz of nothing happening. Then something does. So I guess the first question you may have is, who's Helen Suzman? As the poem is dedicated to her. Well, Suzman was a South African politician who spoke out strongly against the country's racist apartheid policy. And in fact, from 1961 to 1974, she was the only anti-apartheid member of parliament. And the poem suggests that it may seem impossible to fight back against those with power, but little by little, and sometimes in very small ways, we can make a difference and bring about change. So let's dive into the first stanza, or quatrain, as there are 4 lines here. And things start with a very simple sentence: nothing happens until something does, which may seem blindingly obvious, but it sets things up nicely for later on. There's a sense here that something will happen, but we can't be sure how or even when. And the second, third, and fourth lines start to build up anticipation thanks to the enjambment that adds more pace to how we say these lines. We're also introduced to a distant buzz, a sound that may be approaching and could signal that a change is coming. Now, a buzz could remind us of worker bees, has connotations of those maybe, or simply that a buzz is often used to describe something exciting. The rhyme scheme here also helps evoke a sense of anticipation. Rhyming does, was, buzz, and does uses a strong AAAA rhyme scheme that also adds pace. The meter here is what we call an accentual meter, meaning there are the same number of beats or stressed syllables in each line. And be careful here not to count the number of total syllables in a line. That actually doesn't matter. It's the number of stressed ones here that are the same. And in this case, there are 4 beats to each line, but not always in the same place. So for example, and all you hear is the distant buzz of nothing happening until something does. It's also worth thinking about buzz, the sound of buzz, as it's an example of onomatopoeia. And this z sound repeats and increases throughout the poem, ensuring that auditory imagery is also very strong, which seems appropriate for a poem called Song. Now, in the second stanza, we see examples of how small things can bring about major change. And here we see change actually taking place within a slightly longer stanza. This one is 6 lines, known as a sestet. This allows the speaker to describe change in more detail, from small hands to a voice or a single feather. We start with a lot of hands in a large hall. Now, we don't know if the hands are clapping, waving, pushing, what they're doing, but they're making a difference because the air around vibrates and the walls shake. The hands obviously represent a smaller part of something whole or a whole person, and when poets write like this, they're using a technique called synecdoche. Now, as we read on, you may note several other examples like this. The single voice is another synecdoche and may well refer to Suzman directly, of course. Next, we see how things on their own can also bring about change. Just one voice could smash glass, we're told, or a single feather may be the difference between a ship floating or sinking. Note too, all of that assonance here, or repeated vowel sounds, and the internal rhymes near the start that again give it quite a bouncy, uplifting feel. There's small and whole, and then make, vibrate, shake. And if you've ever heard of the butterfly effect, that's really what's going on here. That's the idea that when a butterfly is said to flap its wings in Tokyo, that sets off a tornado in the USA. Very small thing, bringing about big change. Now, next, the speaker pauses to describe the importance of what's happening here. If you note up to now, the lines have been mainly in italics, like a song. And here the speaker instead tells us what's actually going on and happening. And these minor acts are nothing new, we learn. They've been going on sung time and again by those who've been oppressed and pushed down by these metaphorical weights. Connecting to this is the adjective crushed, which reflects how hopeless the oppressed feel. The repeated phrase, the weight, and the broken voices shows how the poet uses parallelism to really make this point. And although the voices may be broken and hushed, the tune can't be stopped. And we start to understand here how even that single voice can create hope and ensure people remain strong. Now, moving on, the next stanza tells us how some people are capable of massive change. With an obvious nod to Helen Suzman, we hear how people can use a simple lever to move something as huge as Earth itself. Now, obviously, this is a metaphor about how small things can create big change, but it's also an allusion or an indirect reference to the Greek maths legend Archimedes. He once said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." Now, it sounds like those hands or voices are the lever that's needed to improve things here. Now, a lever is a particularly good metaphor as it does allow an individual to lift something far greater than their own weight. And the list in that second line of a lever, a fulcrum, a weight should have an and, but it's missing. And when we miss out a conjunction like this, it's known as a syndeton. And here it gives the sense that nothing is going to get in the way of these objects and change, not even a conjunction. Now, as the poem starts to wrap things up, we return to the italics and the main idea that nothing happens until something does. Now, those hands in the hall are now part of that buzz of the broken and seem much more powerful and capable of change. And this phrase stands out because of the alliteration and shows us how even those who are victims can fight back and lift themselves up. Those levers and fulcrums start to move, and as a result, the heart is also lifted, evoking a sense of optimism. The people may still feel broken, the poet doesn't try to pretend otherwise, but now they have hope. And then in the final stanza, we return to where we started with almost exactly the same words as stanza 1. But can you see the difference there? There is a subtle difference if we look closely. In that last line, there's now a full stop, or period, and the word until is replaced with then. So it reads, all you hear is the distant buzz of nothing happening, then something does. Now the full stop, or a caesura, changes the meaning entirely. Now something is happening and there's a much greater sense of victory. Repetition like this happens a few times in the poem, but it's most obvious here, I think. Right, now moving on to the structure of the poem. Rather appropriately, the poem's song does sound like a song. A lot of it is in italics for a start, which suggests these parts are really lyrics. And in terms of shape, we have a quatrain followed by 4 sestets, and then that final quatrain with its powerful message that something is changing. The rhyme scheme is very strong in the first and last stanza with that AAAA pattern as well. But despite sounding like a song, the meter isn't completely regular. There are often the same number of beats in a line, but they're not in a pattern. We call this an accentual meter. So it sounds like a song, but it's not following all the rules. Perhaps a bit like those who challenge the status quo. It's not always smooth going. Interestingly, the final beat of each line is stressed, and that's known as a masculine ending, which also adds to the upbeat, strident feel. In the sestet, the rhyme scheme changes, and there it's BC, BC, DD. Those first 4 lines use an alternating rhyme scheme, which slows things down considerably, then goes back to a DD pattern at the end. So overall, the poem celebrates the power of some leaders to fight back and also recognizes the power of individuals who can also act to demand change. So there we are. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe.